There we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and then what I'll do is I'm going to show the slides that Lakshmi was sharing not last week, a couple weeks ago, and then I'll switch to I have a Power BI workbook pulled up, so we'll just deep dive into some of the concepts. I'll talk through some of these, and we'll go through it there. Okay, so let me start sharing here. All right, so this is the part one of our PL-300 deep dive, right? The part one will be focusing on preparing data and then managing some of that data with the data model. And so the first slide I want to talk about here is, well, again, preparing data using Power BI. Then we're going to talk about modeling data. First thing, getting your data. So this is very basic to a lot of you that have been dealing with Power BI, but since it is part of the exam, I'm going to cover it. So please don't snooze off on me, but we're going to be going through some of these basics. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to pull this up. I have a sample workbook pulled up. And what I'll do, actually, I was hoping to keep it on my other screen. 1 second. Bear with me here. Let me see if that works. Let me see if I can keep this up. I won't pull up. It's fine. I'll just keep it like this. All right, connecting to and combining data into a semantic model. So what we'll do is I'm just going to pull this over. I want to make sure I stay on topic here as I'm going through it because I can get lost and I have ADHD, so I tend to go into different features here. But what I have here is your traditional, Power BI, just a sample report that I built using sample data. And the first part of building any report is connecting to data, right? I mean, you're going to connect to it somehow. So how do we do that? And I wanted to walk through a couple different examples here, some that may be on your exam and may trip you up, and some you may not be aware of. So first part is just your standard get data. You click on this, you click on more. This is going to pull up the new version of the get data within Power Query. You may not see this. I believe this is in preview. I just turned a lot of preview features on just so I can get prepared for the future. But this is what it'll look. If it doesn't look like this for you now, a future version of Power BI, it will look like this. There's many different sources here, right? So one thing I want to point out immediately is when we typically choose get data, we think, okay, we're going to connect to a source. Well, with Power Query, you can actually connect to a folder, as it shows right here. Like you can connect to an actual, like say, SharePoint folder or folder somewhere else, and bring in the contents of that folder. Then within Power Query, do some fun stuff, transform it there. I'm not going to go into that because that would take a big chunk of our time. But this is how you just connect to things, right? You just connect to it right here. SQL Server, if you have SQL Server, Web API. So what I want to do here is, if we have a file on our OneDrive, which let me see if it still logged me in, please. All right, I'm going to pull up a sample file here in my OneDrive. If you have a file in OneDrive or a file in, where is it? I think it logged me out when I was preparing for this. Yeah, I'll just do this. I have a sample right here. You don't connect to Excel, all right? So this might come up if it's asking you to connect to a file on SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever. You can use that native connector to Excel or SharePoint, if you will. But the way I would suggest is you connect to web. And the first thing you do is you go down to details, scroll down to the bottom, go down to path, copy that direct link. You're going to want that direct link. Go to get data, go to web, and what you'll see here is you just put in that hyperlink I just copied there, organizational account, I'll sign in. It's going to either make me authenticate or it's going to go through 3 loading screens once I click this. 2, 3, bravo, there we go. You can change your privacy level. So what does privacy level mean? We might get to this, I think, in another section, but since it's here, I'll cover it now. Privacy level most likely will come up on your exam, and it's important to understand what this does. So private, or the privacy level, it's not just about security. It's about how the data, it can be about efficiency too in your data model, and if you can combine different data points. Was there somebody that had a question? No. All right. So it's how the model in the backend combines different data points. If you set your privacy level to none for your data connection, whatever you're connecting to, there's no privacy, there's no restrictions whatsoever. You can combine public sources with internal sources that are supremely private. And I wouldn't suggest necessarily doing that, but you can. Private, however, is if you set it to private, it will only reference itself and it won't blend with blend with other data sources within your semantic model in the sense of communicating with each other. And so what that means is it basically stays private within the semantic model, won't get passed out to anything else, and won't communicate with the public there. So if you have any HR data, salary data, anything like that, that you do not want to be made public by accident or by a hack, not that this is foolproof, but that's essentially what it does. So keep it private there. Organizational means if you set, let's say you have HR data and you have course data, for instance, and they're both set to organizational, they can blend with each other because they're within the same organization, or any data that is within the organization can blend with that. And then public is more used for like public APIs, just public data sources right there. I'm going to set it to none because this is just a demo, and I don't even know what's going to pop up here on this this book I just presented. You'll click next, and then sure enough, it comes up like any other workbook would. Connect to it, and then you start transforming it. Okay, so there's one little thing I wanted to cover right there as it relates to some of that stuff. Okay. All right, the next thing I wanted to show everybody, I think, what was the next slide? I'll pull it up here, and we'll just go down the line. So we talked about this last time, but it's the appropriate storage mode, and we'll dive into some of this. So import mode obviously is the fastest. It utilizes a VertiPack engine for efficiency, right? You can load millions, billions of rows technically if you really want to into import mode. I wouldn't necessarily load billions into your model because that just increases the size of the flat file, the PBIX itself. So maybe not do that, but it can, I guess. And then direct query. Now, direct query lives in the source system. As it says here, this performance is slower. It's dependent upon the performance of your query that's hitting whatever that source system is, which is also that's a big time issue for me because we have to use direct query a lot. However, when you're talking about taking the PL-300, I think knowing which transformations are excluded or not supported when you're in direct query mode is very important. So if you're taking the exam, you'll likely get questions around this. And the easiest way to think about this is when you're in direct query, you can only use transformations in Power Query that can be done at the source layer as well. So think of it as filtering rows, pivot or unpivot, renaming columns, things of that nature. Very basic stuff, essentially. Things you cannot do: merging different queries. A direct query maybe to a different data source, left join, outer join, things like that. You cannot append queries. You cannot do heavy text transformations that maybe aren't supported, calls to APIs, things like that. So if you're using direct query, please make sure that you're aware of what those limitations are, and when you're taking the test, brush up on what those limitations are as well. Dual is pretty fun. This will probably come up in your exam too. So dual, again, is a mixture of import and direct query when it comes to storage modes. However, you might be thinking, well, why would I ever use import or direct query? Why don't I just use dual? Fair question, because I had that question as well when I first started with Power BI. But the best approach that I've seen when it comes to dual and understanding it is, let's say you have, again, that billion row query that you have for, say, sales. Well, you want that to probably be direct query. So you keep that in direct query. You optimize it at the source layer as much as you humanly can. And then what I would do after that is you have, say, 4 dimensions. We'll get to star schemas later, but you have visualize this star schema. The fact is in the middle, and then you have your dimensions on the outside. The dual, I would set those dimensions to dual, because what Microsoft does there is it determines, smartly using their own algorithm, whether or not to use import or direct query based on different scenarios there for the dimensions. So that's essentially what dual does, and it allows for more efficient processing with your semantic models essentially there. So I didn't have a demo set up for dual there. And then direct lake is It's not exactly new. It's relatively new. It could be new to a lot of folks that are taking the PL-300 though, because not a lot of folks use Fabric, at least in our group yet. So direct lake is essentially it's a direct connection, not direct query, but it's direct connection to lakehouse tables or lakehouse files stored in your Fabric Lakehouse implementation there, and it's super quick. It mimics import mode in terms of its performance. However, you do need to set it up in Microsoft Fabric first. So, all right, hold on. I have some questions coming in. I'm going to try to answer them as quick, but I do want to make sure. Oh, Lakshmi. Hey, Lakshmi, I see you're in here.
Hey, Geoff.
She's got you guys handled in the chat. Perfect. All right, so I'll keep going on. So the next slide here. So that's the appropriate storage modes. Okay, so there's that. Next one is configuring data connections. So I want to go through some of this too. So I'm going to pull this to the side, and I'm going to give you some live demos about some of this. So we went over privacy levels, right? We went over privacy levels there. So just be aware of what those are and research them. If you have any other distinct questions about it, just be aware at a high level of what they do there. So shared semantic models is something that I think is very important to bring up, and you might get a question around this. So what I mean by this is I actually have, well, I won't give you that example, but how to get to it. So if you click on Get Data and you go to Power BI Semantic Models, what I'm going to do here, it's going to pull up what we have in production. So I'm not going to click on anything, but you click on that, it's going to pull up what you have in your workspaces right here, right? So you can filter to whatever you like and things will pop up, but this is what is already published in some workspace you have. I highly recommend reusing your semantic models in this way. There are some limitations. And so some of these limitations that you might be asked about in the exam are, if you connect to a semantic model, you can't create new calculated columns from this semantic model that you're connecting to. You have to go to the source semantic model, change it there. I wouldn't actually do calculated columns, but that's just an example. And you can't make changes to the M code or the Power Query steps of that semantic model you're connecting to either. So just be aware of that. However, if you know the data exists on a semantic model that is already published, I would recommend using that. So here I'll connect to one, but I won't show any data here because it is confidential. So I clicked on one, and what's going to pop up is a very similar dialog box that you may see if you connect to there we go. So it's connecting here to a semantic model that exists on one of our reports. And I can go in here, and if I just click on, I can click on multiple of these things, and then it just loads into my semantic model. And if there are relationships in that existing semantic model, they load as well. It's already related, boom, it loads instantly like that. So you may know that, you may not. I would highly recommend using this if you don't already. It is a direct query connection technically through Microsoft Analysis Services, but it's very performant, right? Depending on how performant your semantic model is, right? If it's in import mode, it'll be, even though it's direct query, it'll still be very performant there. And so that's one thing there. Just be aware of the shared semantic models as well. I mentioned how to go over connecting to files and databases. That'll be fun. I have another fun way to show you how to connect to different environments here coming up in about a minute or two. So setting credentials and then managing gateway connections. So managing gateway connections, that's on the Power BI service. I would read more about that. I don't have that set ready right now for a demo today. To me, that's a whole different section there, but just be aware of what a gateway connection is what I would say. Be aware of why you need one once you can develop it in Power BI Desktop and then publishing it to the service, why you then need to, depending on if you're connecting to SQL Server or whatever it is, you will need to create a gateway there. So that way the service can communicate with whatever that data source is, and that's what they call that gateway there. Just being aware of what that is, how you can set up one and manage it there. But setting credentials. So if we go here, I'm going to go to transform data. You can go to data source settings, and then you'll see here there's multiple different data sources here. If you click on edit permissions, say this one, this is privacy level none. This is just, again, sample right here. It's nothing special. This right here is our SQL Server one. And I can go here, encrypt connections, revoke, change it all right here. So just be aware of where those data source settings are and the credentials are as well when you get in here. Sometimes you'll get some weird errors and you won't know what to do with it because everything seems nice. Go check out those data source settings and see if your credentials are still valid. All right. All right. So the next one is parameters. So create and modify parameters. I would say if we were on a normal session, I'd say, hey, show of hands, who's used parameters? We're not. So I'm going to just speed through. So parameters in not just in report development. Remember, this is all about right now connecting to data and preparing it. So in that end, in the Power Query step for preparing or creating parameters, I'm going to click Transform Data. And then you'll see up here, Manage Parameters. You can click New Parameter. And then once you click New Parameter, you create your parameter. As you can see, what I've done is I've already created a parameter called server name. And so one thing that I will say is one of the quintessential things you'll be asked likely on the exam if this comes up is, okay, why would you create a parameter when you're preparing data? Well, if you have environments in your organization, say a dev, a test, or a dev, a QA, and a production, and you want to have your report easily cycle through those, what you can do is if you have, let's say all of these data sources connected to my SQL Server instance. What I did was I created a parameter. I'm going to go to Advanced Editor here. So by the way, Advanced Editor is going to be your friend. If that ever comes up, Advanced Editor shows you all the M code that goes into all your steps on the Power Query side. Instead of hard coding your server name in the connection, I mean, you have to do that initially, but then you can enter in the server name parameter that I created right here. And I think you may be able to see where this is going. I can change it to the production. And then I go back here. The data will load. Hey, it's in production. Go back, change this to dev. Go back here. I had to give it permission. But the easiest way to do this is just going in here, changing your parameter to whatever it may be, those different environments, and then all of your data sources will change instantaneously. You can go to your report and you can see how things change. It's the easiest way. Instead of making 3 different reports for 3 different environments, just make a parameter. Insert that parameter into your connection string right there, and then voila, whenever you make the change, the data changes as well. So that'll likely come up. Something about parameters in that sense will come up on your exam. So remember that if you haven't used them before. Okay. Now, all right. So next, what was next? Profile and clean your data. All right. So this is now we're getting excited. Actually, let me stop. We're about 18 minutes in. We have a little longer to go, but are there any questions about what I've gone over so far that you'd like me to elaborate on quickly? No? Perfect. All right, let's go. Profiling and cleaning data. All right, let me get through here. So evaluate your data. So that's just a screenshot. I'm gonna actually show you. So evaluating your data. So if you go into transform data, this is very useful, by the way. So this is going to be on the exam probably, but also remember this for real life because this is going to be super helpful when you have those questions of why isn't this working? All right, so I'm going to go into, where was I? Class enrollment. If you go into view, once you're in the transform data, the Power Query dialog box here, and then click on column distribution, column profile, and then column quality. Monospace just changes the font right here. So it depends on how you prefer it, right? So, but it doesn't give you any extra features in that sense. I've clicked all these 3, and you see how much information now we can see around everything. So again, this is not real data. This is not live data from the University of Miami. This is just sample stuff. So you can see here I have student ID selected, and 100% are valid, thankfully. If there were any errors, they show up here. And then if there were any null values or empty values here, they would show up as well. There's 978 distinct, 957 unique values. And then if we go here, hold on, you can see the value distribution. Okay, this thing shows up 3 times. Some students show up only once, some students do that. So it shows you the distribution of the actual values themselves right there. You can do this for every other column as well. If you really wanted to see, okay, how many times does this show up? To me, this is very useful. I used to go in, load the data, then I'd create visuals to explore it and everything. You can do it all right here within Power Query, and it's a huge time saver, and you'll probably be asked about it. So, depending on your, initial objective, you might want to know it just for the exam, but I would suggest using this knowledge for your day-to-day as well. Here's the empty. I wanted to show you this. So there's 10% empty. What you can do is, okay, it says, hey, remove empty. You can actually go on the ellipses here, keep errors, remove duplicates, remove empty, remove all of them right here. If you think, hey, oh, no, we don't want any empty values are here, or keep the errors, only keep the errors. We need to see what the errors are if there any come up. And the errors could be for a number of reasons, right? Could be a type mismatch, could be something else, something very strange. Maybe it's not an atomic value, who knows? But keep that in mind that you can go to View, Column Distribution, Column Profile, and see everything there and to evaluate your data. No need to create a bunch of bespoke visualizations to just explore your data when you can do it within Power Query. Okay. And then something else is going to come up. Well, I'll do it later. That's fine. All right. And then cleaning and fixing data issues. So as I mentioned earlier, you can go here. You can click on, let's say, like empty, right? You can click on this, replace errors, remove errors, all of this stuff. You can clean it right here, and that's good. I'm going to remove these right now, just show you some things. You can do that. Remove empty. Let me go to transfer. Where's the replace? Replace values. So if you know that there's a certain value that shouldn't exist, and I forgot to say this. Let me give you a caveat. Please do not rely on cleaning and fixing your data issues only within the report. Remember Roach's maxim. This has nothing to do with the PL-300, but this is best practice. Clean it at the source when you can. Please do not only have it cleaned in a semantic model somewhere, right? Let's clean it at the source whenever we can. However, for the purposes of this presentation, let's go through what you can do. So you can replace the values, right, of whatever you like. So if you say you had a blank, let's click replace values. Find blank with and replace it with something else, right? It's just a find or replace right there. So, that you can just do everything right there. Right click on it. You can see replace errors with something. Maybe you don't want the error to be just a problem. Maybe you want to flag it. So that way you can just go in here, replace the errors with error, right? And then you can explore them a little differently there. That way your semantic model loads efficiently. That's something to do. You can also parse data, split columns. So the split columns, you can split it by delimiter, number of characters, positions, anything there. I would recommend looking at all the different ways when you go to transform, all the different options right here. I'm not going to go through every single one because we don't have all the time to go through every one in depth, but recommend looking at all of these options to see what you can do. And when it comes to cleaning and fixing some of these data issues that you might have there. All right. So the next one. All right. Next we have transforming and loading data. All right. So shaping data. So as I mentioned earlier, go back to this. As I mentioned earlier, keep in mind the direct query import mode. You have different functionality within Power Query depending on your storage mode there. We're going to assume everything's in import mode, by the way, for this, because that just makes it a lot easier. But keep in mind, when it comes to shaping your data for direct query, you can do a lot of the shaping if it's related to like pivoting and unpivoting. But some of the other shaping you can't necessarily do, like merging and unmerging, appending, and things like that. There. So with shaping data, like what do we mean by shaping data there? Well, say for instance we wanted to, let me find one. Yeah. Let's say I wanted to have two different columns here. I wanted to, there we go, split columns by delimiter. And I wanted to just have a space, each occurrence of this, click OK. And you see here it has term.1, term.2. I would go in here, I'd rename these columns, right? Like go here, rename, changes to year, changes to season, if you will, and then boom, we have two different areas right there. I'm not going to do that right now because I already have it set up, and then that's just going to cause some issues there with me. So that's one right there. You can also extract different if you have say you have a long string field and you wanted to extract a certain value from it and it recognizes a pattern. You can use that by whatever it may be, right? Whatever that pattern is there. You can merge columns together if you really wanted to merge columns together. Basically, concatenate if you want, and then parse it out. So this may come up, may not, but parsing data, the JSON, like you can bring in JSON, or maybe there's a field that stores JSON. Boom, parse that out immediately. And then this is of XML too, but JSON's probably a little more modern now, but I'm sure we run into XML a lot now, a lot anyway. But parse that out with a simple click of a button, right? If it's in the field, remember that's there. Then you can set up maybe a separate table with the JSON data, depending on how the structure is there, the architecture of the JSON. And then of course data types, right? Like data types are data types. Make sure you get them right. That's pretty much all I can say about that. Don't rely on Power BI to intelligently and automatically tell you what the data type is, right? It does a pretty good job. However, sometimes you don't want it to be an int. You want it to be a string, or sometimes, or you want it to be different. So make sure you're taking care of that when you're going through shaping your data there. All right, aggregating and reshaping data. So let me go through here. All right, I'm going to just, let me click on this, let it load a little bit. So aggregating and reshaping data, I am going to, yeah, maybe this is a good one. All right, I'll click on this and click unpivot. So unpivoting columns, what does that do? I'm just going to click on pivot and see what it does, right? I know what it does, but you'll see. Sometimes you need to take the, let me go back, whoops. Sometimes you need to take the tall data. Let me do pivot. Hold on. There we go. That's what I was looking for. I got ahead of myself, guys. All right. So values column, the cohort term code. Sure, that's fine. I'm going to click OK. And what this is going to do, once it finishes, is it's going to take the tall into the wide, right? It's going to take the long into the wide there for you. So if you ever have a scenario in which you need to do that, you can do this in SQL, right? It's something I would recommend doing it in SQL if you can first, but you can do it in Power Query as well. And then one thing I'm going to do to be cute, it's not going to return the exact results, but maybe it will. I'm going to unpivot it. So pivot, remember, it goes from, it makes it wide, and unpivot makes wide to what you'll see here. Long again, right? So it's basically just flip-flopping, transposing there in a way. So pivot and unpivot are potentially going to be something you use a lot when it comes to, like I said, aggregating and reshaping some of this data that you're going to be working with. Aggregating data. So group by is going to be your friend here when it comes to aggregating. Let me go home. All right, group by. So I'm going to click on, first I'm going to do this. I'm going to split this by space, click OK. And then again, if this was in production, I'd rename these to sensible names instead of cohort term.1 and 2. But for the purposes of the demo, group by, you'll probably be asked about aggregation. So this is how it works. I'm going to group by this column. So the year, essentially. Right here, I'm going to create a new column name, call it count of terms. Whoops. Count of terms. The operation is going to be count rows. You can do a lot of stuff here, though, right? You can do the distinct count of rows, which, by the way, is very helpful when you have a different grain of data. So you can create different tables, right? So if I didn't want to manipulate this table that I'm currently on, I'll show you. You right-click on this query. Maybe you reference the query or you duplicate it. That's a whole different topic of discussion. But then you can then create maybe a distinct count of whatever you're grouping by there. Now, notice how I'm grouping by one field here. You can go to advanced and group by multiple, right? You can keep adding them if you want. I'm not going to keep adding them, but you can do that. And I've had to do that before in the past. For this demo, we're just going to group by one. Count term, count rows, click OK, and you'll see here. There we go. So now we've aggregated, we've grouped by whatever that column was, the year in this instance, and now we've counted, or we could have summed, we could have done whatever we wanted to there, and now we have an aggregate table right here. But notice, like I said, this actually just destroyed my original intent for dim cohort term. So I'm going to get rid of these steps. Again, you can just get rid of those over on the side. And then if I wanted to, I could reference or duplicate that query and then create a new table that is that aggregate table, whatever I'm grouping by there. So as a best practice, just do that. May or may not come up on the exam about duplication or referencing. Probably won't, but just keep that in mind. Okay. So any questions about aggregation at all before I zoom forward? I know I'm going pretty fast, but there's a boatload of content, so I want to make sure I get through the first two buckets of it. Nope. All right.
Geoff, there is a question from Jasmine in the chat. The question is it better to combine steps in M or do one transformation at a time?
So in terms of the PL-300 exam, it's probably important to know that you can do it in M, but you probably should know to do it. Think of it in terms of the GUI for the PL-300, like in terms of GUI, doing it with this, and then it will create a step at a time. However, and I'll just tell you my preference, I prefer to do things, if you can, in M. If you can just write, say 10 lines, or have Copilot write 10 lines for you and you edit it, and then it can do 5, 6 different steps all in one. If you do that, I'll show you another little quick tip. If you do happen to do that and do things in M, I highly recommend adding a comment here. So I'll call this a sample step. And the reason I do that is M is, at least for me, it's gotten better over time, but it's not the easiest to read code of all time, depending on what you're doing. So, and if you go back to a semantic model, you just did a bunch of stuff too 2 years ago, you'll have no idea what you did. So leave a comment there or some description of what you want, and then see how it pops up here, and you have a tooltip of it there. So I guess it really depends. There's not, if you're a master in M, then you're going to say, oh yeah, do M every single time. But if you don't understand M at all, then you're certainly going to do the GUI. So it really just depends there. But for the purposes of the exam, I would focus on the GUI, but knowing M exists, and also knowing what some of the functions you can do in M code are, right? Like, but it's not going to be an exam that tests you on your M knowledge. I'll just put it that way. Does that answer that, Jasmine? I'm gonna keep going on. I'm gonna say yes because you put, oh my god, I love M comments. So boom. All right, cool. I'm glad I could get good stuff there. All right, so let me see what's next here. Oh yeah, combining and organizing queries. Again, I'll flash that up and then we'll just go on to the next one. All right, so let me see here. Combining and organizing queries. So I'm just looking over here. Yeah, it's on the next slide, so I won't go into that next. All right, so you see over here, organizing queries. I didn't do a good job here when I set this sample thing up, but what you can do, let's say, right-click here, move to a group, click New Group. What I did here is just Control, selected these 3 dims, created a new group here. I'm going to call these dimensions. And then you can set a description if you like. I would highly recommend it, but I'm being bad, so I'm not going to do that right now. And then see, they start organizing themselves magically. You can also do that with other things, right? So if you have staging tables, highly recommend creating staging group. And then we'll get into another feature to use for staging tables. Create those, and then facts, whatever you want to, whatever makes sense for your semantic model, organize them that way. Then when it comes to combining queries, so let me go into, what was I in this one? Yeah. Combining over here on the right-hand side on the home ribbon, and then you see merge and append queries, and you can also combine files. We're not going to do that right now, but keep that in mind. You can combine files. Merge queries, the easiest way for me to explain this and for you to understand and remember this if it gets asked on the exam is, well, first, you can click merge queries, and what this will do, if you just click the plain merge queries, it's going to add that as an applied step on the right-hand side. But if you click merge queries as new, it's going to add a new query over on the left-hand side. So depending on what you want, you may want to keep it as the same one, right? You don't want to create another one. You may want to create another one. I'm going to click merge queries as new for this. And you'll see some common SQL language pops up finally. All right, join kind. basically merging queries is think of it like a query operation, a SQL operation. Are you going to do a left, a right outer, full outer, inner, left ante or right ante? What I'll say about these to know about them is, yeah, it's the rows only in the first or the second. They're anti-joins. Used, at least in my experience, sparingly, but when you have to use them, oh, they're a lifesaver. So know about them, know that they exist. Don't try to use them in your daily practice, but man, when you need them, they come through, and they're really great. So anyway, left outer joins, right outer joins, they perform the exact same way. Full outer joins just return everything from each. So there's going to be scenarios you'll need that, and then inner joins there. How you'll do this is you're joining from this dim cohort term to let me do dim term here, and then what you'll do is you'll click on whatever. I'll do this. I'm joining on text here, not the greatest, but what I did was I clicked on this, and then I clicked on this header as well, and now it knows, hey, I'm going to try to match on these two fields. They're using a left outer join, so it's going to join from dim cohort term to dim term, and then you can see here it's running a little query, estimating matches based on data previews. It should come up with 12 out of 12. If not, yeah, there we go. Matches 12 out of 12, and that's with the left outer. So if you have fields in the right that don't match the left, it won't show 12 out of 12, maybe show 12 out of 15, or who knows. It'll be different there. So that's how you do the merge. All right, so that's merge right there. And if I clicked OK, it would generate another query over here. I'm not going to do that for right now. Append queries are basically your unions, right? So if I appended a query here, append query, again, we'll just create a new step. Append queries is new query over there. So if you need to union things or append them together, that's where you'd use append queries right here. And we are at 137. I got to get rolling. Hold on. All right, next thing I wanted to show. There's so much content here. It's rich. Load and configure data. So this is what I'm doing here. It's talking about identifying and creating appropriate keys for relationships. I'll go over that. Enabling, disabling query load. Go over that. That's important to know. And then understanding query dependencies, also important to know. And it's very helpful too. So identifying and creating appropriate keys for relationships. What does that mean? I'm going to exit out of this, and I have another one pulled up. That's actually one of our production workbooks, or a semantic models. Well, a piece of a semantic model here. We have a credit hours one that we use for a production report. And you'll see here, it's your classic star schema, right? We have our fact and then dimensions all the way around for credit hours. And this is using, by the way, if you get tested on this, just be aware, you can create new layouts, right? So this isn't all the tables that we've loaded into our report in this semantic model. This is just those that were created to credit hours. Anyway, you'll see this is related on key snapshot ID and academic program ID. Same thing right here. What this is not it's a single field, but we've had to create a composite key because there's two different fields, snapshot, and then what the program ID was as of that snapshot. Say 5 years ago, maybe that program ID was different. And so we've had to make a composite key of that. So that way, again, Power BI, you relate on one field. It's not like SQL where you can join on 7, 8, 9, however many fields there. So you have to create a composite key in wherever that source is, or you can do it in Power Query, and then relate on that. Make sure the grain makes sense when you're relating that. That's what they mean by creating an appropriate key for the relationship. If you have if this was many to many, for instance, from fact to dimension, well, it's likely I don't want that. I want a one to many. So where the one, this little arrow here means the one to many, this slicer, if I have a slicer from a field here in this table, it will propagate here to the fact. So just be aware of that. That's what they're talking about when they mean appropriate keys for relationships. They're talking about the grain there. And then be aware what these arrows mean. You can get you can have cross filtering in both directions or single. If it's one-to-one, it's going to default to both, which is fine. Sometimes you'll need both, and you'll see that coming up. I did both for a visual I did here in another report, but just keep that in mind. Know what these arrows represent. They represent the cross-filter direction. Know the difference between the two. All right, let me go back in here. The next thing on this slide was enabling and disabling query load. What in the world does that mean? Well, let's say right here. This is a sample SQL query we have. Good stuff. If I right click, you can see enable load. Why would they give us that option? Shouldn't we want everything loaded? No, we don't want everything loaded all the time in our semantic model. If you click on this and you toggle this off, when you go to your report view, it won't show in your model at all because you don't want that to show potentially, right? Let me go back. And so the use case around this is, let's say you have and this is one of the questions you might get asked, like, why would you use this? The use case is if you have, say, raw data you're loading into staging tables into your environment, and then you're creating more aggregate tables or cleaner tables from that using Power Query steps, you will want to, again, create maybe a new group called, not new query, new group called staging, right? You load all the raw data tables into there, you save them there. Disable the enable load function, or just check that off. I mean, toggle that off. Then it won't load with the rest of your data model. So when you go to save the data model, it won't just make it a huge PBIX file or anything like that. But when you use your Power Query steps, you can still reference those tables in your Power Query steps or in measures you create or things like that. So keep that in mind. It's a nuance here, but it helps enhance the efficiency of your model and the report there. And it, from an organization perspective, within your semantic model, it's really helpful there within Power Query too. All right, the last thing is something that's pretty cool too. So it's query dependencies. So if I go here, again, I went to view and then query dependencies. Oh, let me zoom in. Oh, no. Go here, and now you can see, oh, now I have these sources, and these, again, just flat files that I've loaded into here. But then I have, oh, what is this? There's server name. Oh, this is the parameter I created. And then this is the SQL server I've gone into, and then this is loaded into here. So you can see the parameters somehow in this source. It's because it's the server name that we were able to toggle to the different values there. And then we have the SQL server that's loaded over here. And then this file, whatever this is, courses.csv, has created these 3 different files. And then fact term enrollment from this created dim term. And then I have test description here. If you add a description to your table that you've loaded, it will load and show right here as well. So anyway, that's pretty cool stuff. So keep that in mind. Again, this is being recorded. Please feel free to review it, but you'll probably get asked question or two around what I just went over related to relationships, query load, dependencies, and everything. All right, so then last today, part 2, it's already 1:43, so I got to zoom through this. And I do want to show you, I think I'll dedicate time, if it's getting too close, I want to dedicate time to time intelligence. I think that's going to be something that's going to pop up in your exam for sure, and one way or another, so we're going to go over through that. All right, next, modeling and preparing data. I like modeling data. Sometimes it can be a pain, but you get a good data model, makes reporting a breeze. So data modeling in Power BI. They're going to talk about star schema when they talk about data modeling. Again, that's fact table in the middle, dimensions all around the outside. If you want to see one in production, literally it works. It's right here. This is what we have right there. So star schema. Configure table and column properties. So I'm going to go through these a little bit. Nothing too crazy. They have some DAX stuff in here as well, but I don't want to spend too much time because, like I said, I want to spend some time on time intelligence. All right, so let's go to, say, fact term enrollment. I'm here. I'm on the right-hand side. Go to columns. Wait. Let me discard the changes real quick. Go to tables. Why is it not popping? Here we go, properties. All right, so you can actually go into the different columns here, change your data type, summarization settings, hide unnecessary columns, format them this way. So if you go into your data model and you prepare your data right here, you can click on, let's say, where's the date? Wow, that's fine. Go through here, you can change it, you can hide it, is hidden, change that to no, or you can just click on the little eyeball right there. Sort by right here, format is text, data type is text. There are some, let's see, That's a measure. So that's not really, you can format the measures back here if you really want to, and just change it right here. So keep that in mind. You can change some of these. You can add descriptions too, by the way, within here. You can change descriptions, the home tables, the display folders here. You can create subfolders within here as well. So this may come up if you need to create, if you have a measures table and you need to group your measures by, let's say some are pertaining to admissions, some are pertaining to different areas of your business. You enter a display folder right here, a value, and it just automatically groups it under that folder right there. So you can do that pretty easily there. So keep that in mind. Again, I know I'm going quick, but I apologize for that. The hour or the 45 minutes is flown right by, but I do want to get to some of the other things. Defining relationships. So again, this is standard stuff, but it's going to come up. How do you define a relationship? So what I do, just go here, drag it over, and just connect it. You can also, you can also go in here, change it, column to whatever the column may be. If you want to force it to be many to many, I don't know why you would, you can. But again, the cross filter direction is important right there. Remember the single, depending on which way the arrow is flowing, or like I have right here, the double right there. The double is showing right here because it's 1-to-1, and I'll get to that a little bit. All right. I'm anxious to get to the time intelligence, so let me get here. All right, so we're about to get to this. So I'm going to blame the slide here. It says create a common date table. I actually know how it's done, and I'll show you how it's done with DAX. You can go up to new table, and then when you click new table, a DAX formula bar will pop up right here, and you can enter something like this in here. Creates, you enter calendar. I just did one from January 2020 through the end of 2030, and created these columns, right? And then what you'll see under date is a bunch of stuff, right? You'll see what you expect. It's a column or a row for every single day from the date range. I wouldn't do that. I would not create a date table with, unless you absolutely need to. There's never an absolute rule for this stuff. But I would rather create a date table, a dim date table at the source layer. So if you're using SQL Server, Snowflake, wherever that is, create it there. And the reason for that is then you can have every other report just reference that. Instead of, if you have specialized logic that needs to be referenced by other ones, just reference that source layer. So I did one here in this example just because, we're talking about PL-300, but that's how you do it. So if they bring it up on the exam, you can create a date table right here. And then this date table is used for what they call time intelligence functions. So actually the next slide is about DAX. I'll get into DAX as part of the time intelligence talk, all right? But DAX is data analysis expressions. You've probably heard of it, especially if you're going to be taking the PL-300, right? So we won't have to spend too much time here. Basic measures, pretty simple stuff right there, how to create them. I'm not going to dive too far into that. If you want to know more about that, I would just take some time to do that. Calculate and filter context. So calculate is one of the ones I use the most when it comes to this stuff because you can add in, as it says, a filter criteria at the end. So think of this as, this is basically a sum if you're thinking of an Excel. It's a lot more powerful than that because you can add multiple criteria right here. Plus you can get really funky with your criteria because DAX is so multi-layered. Yeah, here we go. Time intelligence. So I spent some time this morning creating an example here. Time intelligence, show you exactly what it means, okay? So what's important here with time intelligence, you need to have a date table. So the reason they told us to create one is for time intelligence, you need one. And if you don't have one as your source layer, you can create one within DAX. So if you don't have one, you can create one there. And what I've done here is on dim term, let me show you what this data looks like. It's just the term, a code for it, and then when the term the term started, and then a sort code for it, so that way it sorts easier in a slicer. And then I've related that to my dim date table on date. So date and term start date, just related on there. We're good to go. Now that I've done that, I'll show you. Again, it's kind of messy. I didn't group these. My bad. I wouldn't do it in production, but I'm here. There's time intelligence functions. So what are time intelligence functions? Have you ever been asked about, hey, where were we at last year this time? Or how are things year to date? What's quarter to date, month to date, same period, compared to last year, everything there. That's where time intelligence can come in really handy. As long as you, again, set your data model up correctly with a date table and you have everything related right, these time intelligence functions, they can really make comparing different points in time a breeze, depending on what your data structure looks like. So what I have here, I just took some data from, I have a measure here called, where is it? Total grade points. Yeah. Total grade points here. It's just the sum. Again, here's your DAX review. You can go up here. I have a measures, click on new measure, and then you can type this in. Sum of the table's fact class enrollment right here. And I'm summing up grade points. So it's just the sum of grade points. We're not supposed to make any inference of it, right? And so I haven't formatted it either just because it's an example. So what I've done here, though, you have year-to-date grade points, prior year grade points, and same period last year grade points. And you might be asking, well, what does that mean? I have a slicer here that will only impact this, and I have it selected to spring of 2026, and I have these validation over here so you can see a little easier. So for year-to-date grade points, we would expect the for 2026 115,434, and yep, it does. And as you can see, this is calculated by using the total YTD function right here. This is your time intelligence. And because I've related it in the back end to the date table, this will automagically create the correct year-to-date value right there without me having to have some special DAX functions and temp variables and everything here within the DAX. It's a simple function. You're done right there. And what you do is you add, okay, what measure are you trying to do the total of, basically a sum, and then it asks you the date. And it's important. I did dim term start date. You can do dim date. They're related on a one-to-one basis, and so it propagates through and it works. Same thing for prior year grade points right here. Again, calculate prior year grade points. It's a little different. It's not prior year grade point or a prior year function or previous year function. You have to use calculate, and basically what this is doing is it's summing up total grade points, and then you pass the previous year dim date. Previous year is looking for, hey, based on whatever I've selected up here, it knows what I've selected, and then it finds the previous date or the previous year, and it's pulling 298,475. The previous year, since I've selected spring 26, would be 25, right? So yep, 298,475. Again, these tables are not impacted by any of these over here. So this is just the data, just for validation, so you can see how these work. And then same period last year. Let me show you that. Similar to how previous year works. You have calculate total grade points and then same period last year, and then you pass it the date. Again, it's super simple. I have spring 26 selected. Same period would be spring 25. Okay, so spring 25, what does that look like? 166216, boom. It pulls the exact same stuff. 3 different points of view, made very simple, done within, I don't know how long it took me, like between the loading and setting it up right here, a couple minutes, right? Like it's super simple to do it that way. Now, that's one measure though. That's grade points. What would happen if we wanted to say, look at the grade points plus, I just had something here, average sessions offered in a term? Would we create 6 total measures here? Or do we just create 2 measures, one for total grade points and one for average sessions offered in term? The answer, of course, is we create 2 measures, but we have to use something that you may not be familiar with. It's called calculation groups. So up until relatively recently, you had to create calculation groups in a separate piece of software, tabular, or someone help me out here, tabular editor. Good Lord. Tabular editor. You can still do that in tabular editor. If you're familiar with it and you love it, you can still do that. Or you can actually go to model view and click on calculation group here and then enter it here. And what is a calculation group? So before I even show you how to do that, let me just explain what that is. A calculation group, I don't know if they'll have examples. They might not on the exam ask you how to create a calculation group. They're going to ask you likely what is a calculation group and why would you create one. And I think actually there's, let me look for a slide here. Yeah, slide. So there is a slide here about calculation groups. And it's important to know why you would have it. All right. So calculation group right here. So they have in the example orders and total sales. And then what they've done is they've created these time calculation groups where you can just select, do you want the current or do you want month to date, prior year, month to date, so on and so forth. And what this will do is it will change the measures that you've passed along to this calculation group and calculate it based on whatever you've done right here. So if you want the prior year, I'll go over here, click on this calculation group, boom. See how these change? So if I'm looking at prior year, 298475, we know that's right. That's 2025. Same thing here. Same period last year, 166216. Same thing right here. And then year to date, 115434. And notice I've used total grade points in average sessions offered in a term, only 2 measures to look at things many different ways. These are similar in functionality to like a parameter, but you really only need to create 2 metrics. Where is it? Where was I? Average sessions. Yeah, just to prove to you that I only created 2 measures, average sessions and total grade points. And then I'm just changing. And then current is current year, right? So everything just adds up there. So there's technically 4 different ways to look at this data, but we only had to create 2 different measures right there. And so how you do it, and I would strongly recommend, you can do so many different things with calculation groups rather than just the time intelligence, but the time intelligence is probably the classic example of why you create calculation groups right there. And so you can see over here, I have let me go back. I have a calculation group called time intelligence, and then I have a column, and then ordinal is something that the system must have created. If you click calculation group here, let me just go up to, just click calculation group. It's going to pop up and say, hey, selected measure. Selected measure is going to be, I always did as current, right? Current equals selected measure. Basically, this is whatever you've selected without any additional filters applied. And then what you'll do is you'll go through, and I'll show you here. Where are we? There we go. Calculation items. So let's say I created this time intelligence. I renamed it to that calculation group column, and then you create items under here. So there's the current, again, selected measure. Previous year is calculate the selected measure, previous year, and the same stuff here. Calculate whatever the selected measure here. Selected measure is going to be your magic here. So I think it's ever since the Tyndall functionality came into play, you could create your own calculation groups. So big shout out there. Amazing functionality here to have Tyndall a part of Power BI. One thing though, so let's say I go here and I unclick Spring 2026. Watch what happens. Prior year grade points is like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Same period last year starts giving me the total overall. That's because prior year grade points at this point does not know, or previous year grade points does not know the context for previous year. I haven't selected a slicer here. So keep that in mind. If it doesn't work, you got to select a slicer. It has to have the context of what to look for when it's talking about previous year. Okay, so there's time intelligence, probably the quickest example or demonstration of time intelligence stuff that you'll see, but be aware of what it is, how and why it's important, right? When you have these groups, you can just keep going through every different one. And instead of, again, of creating 6 different measures, I've created 2. So again, if you create 5 measures and there's 4 different or 3 different different time intelligence areas you want to look for, that'd be 15 measures you'd have to create without calculation groups, right? Instead of just 5. You start to see where I'm going here. It balloons out of control eventually. And one thing as we're going through with measures, let me see what else is that. Okay, semantic model. So this is wrapping it up. Perfect timing. With measures, measures are good. They are not row by row calculations. They're calculated as of the context of whenever you're filtering on your report. They don't take up space in your semantic model. Those are good. Calculated columns, however, they do. So use those sparingly as much as you can. Okay. I know sometimes we can't avoid it, but don't create a semantic model that has a ton of calculated columns. The performance will lag, and you'll end up hurting yourself with that. So the last ones, again, low effort, high impact optimization. So again, performance analyzer, that was another thing I was going to show. Go up to optimize performance analyzer. pull it up. If you haven't used it, I'll show you what it does real quick. Click on start recording. Anything I click, spring, let me change this to this. I'll click stop. It tracks literally everything that happens on your report when you interact with it. It tracks every visual that loads, how long it takes, and then it'll tell you the actual DAX query. So you can go to the DAX query, copy the query if you want to, or click Run in DAX Query View. So DAX Query View is something where you can see the actual underlying DAX that is being passed back to your semantic model. So if you notice that everything's working fine except for this one single measure, you might want to review that DAX in DAX Query View to see what exactly is happening. Hey, ask Copilot, ask ChatGPT, ask some AI to help you with it if you can't read it. But it's a good way to pull on your Sherlock Holmes monocle and start investigating what's going on with your performance there. So I think we're at 201 now. I'm going to go ahead and end this. Any questions I can follow up on before we formally end it and stop the recording? Going once, twice? We good? All right. So we have 2 other sessions this week. James is going to be going over the DP-600 in a deep dive, and then Lakshmi is really going to be going over the part 2 of this PL-300, which she's excellent at visualization and stuff. So she's going to be going through some of that stuff as well. And then I see there's a lot of stuff in the chat. Sorry, I couldn't. I was zooming through. Lakshmi, it's timing. There we go. Yep. So thanks, Lakshmi, for manning the chat and putting in a ton of resources there. And for everybody, I think it's going to be super useful.
Yep. Thank you so much, Geoff. The session was really, really helpful. It was like a quick refresher for me too.
Oh yeah, me too. When I was preparing for it, I was like, oh yeah, that's. So yeah, hopefully it was helpful for everybody. I know I went through super quick. As you can tell, a ton of content. However, a lot of this stuff's probably going to be on the PL-300, right? It's going to be useful for you when you plan to take it. Okay. So thank you, everybody. We hope to see you, everybody, at future sessions, and let us know if you want to present. And we'll see you hopefully later on this week. Bye, everybody.